Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Joanne Dimitrakopoulos. I will be the moderator for this webinar. Please note we are recording the session, which we will distribute at a later date. If you do have a question, please enter the question into the Q&A feature of the Zoom. But before we begin, I'd like to provide a little background on SAMPS, which was established in 2012 as a not-for-profit organization focused on enhancing the skill sets of commercial professionals in the life science industry. Due to the pandemic this year, we will not be holding our annual conference, but instead have transitioned into a series of monthly webinars and networking events. Be sure to sign up for a free membership to stay informed. In complete transparency, I'd like to introduce our panelists who are board members of SAMPS. First of all, I'd like to introduce Andy Bertera, Executive Director of Marketing and Sales with New England Biolabs, and pose the first question to him, which is, how are you operating and doing business during the pandemic?
Well, hello everybody, and thank you for that introduction, Joanne. I'd also like to thank SAMPS as an organization for allowing me to participate in today's panel discussion. It's also great to be connected with both David and Hrissi, who we all work together at Amersham Pharmacia, and whatever other Amersham name it was called at the time, and also GE, and then Hrissi and I also had the pleasure of working together at Promega. As was introduced, work for New England Biolabs. I've been there for 11 years and head up sales, marketing, and customer service in the US. To answer your question, Joanne, I think from sort of when the pandemic first started to have its impact, NEB's sort of position or priority, if you like, was to make sure that all staff were safe and healthy, and also that applied to our customers. As a consequence, the decision was that all staff that could work from home would work from home. And that position is actually still the same today, and is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. For those staff who are more laboratory-based, in production, R&D, non-laboratory and shipping and logistics, there it was really about business continuity. So making sure that they wore obviously the appropriate personal protective equipment, masks and gloves, etc., but also work shifts, so that if any one individual did unfortunately become infected or what have you, they didn't sort of spread that to the rest of the team they were actually working with at that time. And now certainly in our industry, well, maybe a better way to put this, I think the real heroes at the moment are obviously those people, the doctors, the nurses that are on the forefront of treating patients. But life sciences, and hopefully Hrissi and David will agree with it here, we're playing a key role as well, and in some ways a vital role, supplying reagents for the supply of, to manufacture diagnostic tests, to help with the development of vaccines. So ensuring that security supply and making sure that our business continuity was there to support those customers was key also.
Okay, thank you, David. And just touching back on the lab a little bit, I've been hearing that a lot of people have implemented shifts amongst their lab staff. Is that something that you have also implemented?
Correct, yeah, I think it varies by the size of the lab, but typically there's only 2 researchers in a lab at one time, so they can allow the social distancing. And then people are working shifts, could be morning or afternoon, could be, 2 days on, 2 days off, depending on the type of experiments they're doing. We've also been looking, because of that sort of social distancing need, for other locations where we can actually have additional lab space, particularly from an R&D perspective, to work safely, but also get the job done.
Great, thank you. So I would like to pose the same question to Hrissi Smartzidou, who is the Vice President of Strategy, Global Marketing and Customer Experience, Laboratory Chemicals Division of Thermo Fisher Scientific. So Hrissi, how are you operating and doing business during the pandemic?
Yeah, thanks, Joanne, for the intro. Your name and mine are mouthfuls.
Yours is harder to say than mine.
So, Hrissi Smartzidou, as Joanne said, VP of Strategy and Market Development for Lab Chemicals at Thermo Fisher. Quick intro, as Andy said, we worked together for quite some time in General Electric before. I'm with Thermo Fisher for the last 11 years of my career. Life scientist, molecular biologist by training. In the interest of time, let me answer your question. Our approach was very similar to what Andy described. We focus on people first, our own people and of course our customers. And we shifted everything accordingly to ensure our employees are safe. We instituted remote working for the people obviously that could, or we took all the appropriate measures to ensure people who needed to be at the site, particularly operations and manufacturing, that they were protected to do so. With all the measures, either personal protective equipment, social distancing, temperature measuring, all of that. We try obviously to ensure people who worked remotely, they had the right equipment from platforms like the one we're using today, all the way to maybe some helping them with some ergonomic chairs and other types of equipment as possible, as it was possible. Regarding our customers, as I said, we focused on enabling them. As Andy mentioned, we had to enable our customers to survive through the pandemic themselves, but also to help with testing, developing tests, developing vaccines, developing antivirals. So supply chain and business continuity for our customers was a must. So we geared all of our focus to ensure we ensure business continuity internally so that we can enable our customers. Let me pause here, and I know we will touch on some of these as we progress with the webinar.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And finally, I would like to introduce David Weber, who is VP and Chief Commercial Officer with Maravai Life Sciences. Again, David, how are you operating and doing business during the pandemic?
Thank you, Joanne. Appreciate the opportunity to be part of the panel, and really appreciate all the attendees who took some time or taking some time to listen to Hrissi and Andy and I. So your question was, how are we operating and doing business during the pandemic? And my one-word answer is carefully. It's been tricky. I don't have too much to add, frankly, to what Andy and Hrissi said. I think first and foremost, we want to take care of our employees. And to do that, we instituted a policy which said essentially that any employee that can work from home should work from home. And for those employees that can't work from home, who do need to come in to do lab work or to do manufacturing, et cetera, we took a lot of time to equip them with the proper protective equipment to enable them to feel safe and feel confident, and enable them to do their job with that confidence in mind and safety in mind. Furthermore, in one of our plants, in our largest facility, which is very, very active in the COVID-19 fight, we're actually testing all employees. We started testing all employees every week, and ultimately we went to every other week, and that continues today. So that's without going into detail, it's a very significant investment on our part, but one that we consider crucial for the safety of the employees, to build confidence with the employees, and to ensure that we can continue the important work of fighting COVID-19.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. So I think we've spoken a lot about what you're doing for your employees and how you're continuing to run your business. But how has the pandemic affected the way your sales teams interact with customers? And I'll throw that open to everybody.
Well, I mean, obviously, I'll just take a stab very quickly and then turn it over to my colleagues. It's made it much more difficult. And it's made it much more dependent on tools like Zoom, like we're using today, or in our case, we do a lot with Microsoft Teams. Both tools we find to be quite good. You know, customers are not letting us on their site. We don't, frankly, want to go on their site. We are not actively encouraging our employees to travel, particularly by airplane. So it's been much more difficult. And frankly, if you don't have at your disposal as a sales guy or a saleswoman the cell phone number of your customer, it's been increasingly difficult to get email responses. So it's been a challenging environment. On the flip side, when you do get someone, I find customers are more willing to talk and more willing to listen. And that's been encouraging.
Great. I think if we can just pause, we do have a question here. There's one, have you experienced delays in getting results back from your employee testing? If not, is this a concern for you? Also, has this significantly increased your operating costs?
Well, that's a great question. I know I personally got tested, not associated with the testing at my company, and it took me 6 days to get a response, which I think we would all agree is unacceptable in this world. But to answer your question directly about the organization that we're using to do testing down at one of our sites, we're getting feedback in 2 business days, and oftentimes much quicker than that. So that we feel is satisfactory. That's part of the contractual obligation that the partner that's doing the testing has signed up for, and they've been generally living up to that obligation. Has it increased costs? Clearly, it has increased costs. We have to pay for that on a bi-weekly basis. However, on the other hand, we're not traveling as much. We're not going to trade shows as much. There's a lot of areas that we're saving. And frankly, even if we weren't saving elsewhere, I think we would still do this. That's how important and committed we feel to the employee safety and to the work that they're doing to combat COVID-19.
Yeah. Okay. I know we have a couple of more questions that are coming in, but I think, you know, we would really like to hear from Hrissi and Andy how the pandemic has affected the way your sales teams have interact with customers.
As David said, they have been grounded since pretty much since March for their own safety and health. But obviously they're not, as David said, our customers, I mean, in our case, a big part of our customer base is academia. And they have shut down and they're gradually coming back. And actually, most of them are still not at full capacity. So we have been leveraging every piece of technology available to help them engage with our customers virtually. Also, as David said, from the marketing perspective, we're trying to leverage data science and data from CRM and other sources to help our sales with better customer contacts, who is working, who is not working, who is accepting visitors or not, or, you know, so we're trying to help pave the way, if you wish, to make the virtual interaction between our customers and our sales reps more appropriate in this environment. As you know, we have also, the same applies for our channel part of the company, Fisher Scientific, a huge sales force, working remotely mostly. But again, the key is to enable them with better content, better customer information. And also, as David was saying, we saw the same thing. During the pandemic, we saw better interaction, if you wish, from the customers that were engaging with us. They had a true problem. They are more open to engage to work collaboratively to solve whatever the problem is, because they also understand that we face supply chain constraints, we face all sorts of constraints. So helping our sales reps, but also it's interesting to note the increased customer engagement.
Well, I would echo that comment a lot. I mean, similar for us, our sales organization are not visiting customers, and I like the word you used there, that they're grounded. Hrissi, that's a good way to actually put it. Now, I think you're also right that it is a challenge knowing what situation the customers are. You know, some customers have been working through this whole period because they've been working on, you know, viral research related to COVID-19. Other ones have been grounded like the sales organizations, and some it's a mixture as they sort of try to work back in their own labs. And unfortunately, as they shouldn't, you know, they're not telling us which are those sort of buckets they're in. I think the engagement is key, as you've highlighted, and there's many tools that we're also using. And to me, it comes down to, you know, even more than we should be normally, is listening to our customers, you know, understanding the situation they're in, and then empathizing with those needs. You know, they're not really as worried about us, you know, it's us worrying about them and how we can actually help them to actually get back to what they're good at and what they enjoy doing, and that's typically the research. And then on the back end of that, it's engaging with them and being adaptable and having different ways of working. A very simple example is we used to have a rule where we didn't ship to a home address, you know, because we shipped to business addresses, you know, and in many universities, the loading dock was actually closed, you know, there was nobody there to receive goods. So we've had to accommodate shipping to home addresses so that, you know, the researchers can get the products they want and then obviously take them on to into their institution to use. So that, you know, adaptability and almost, you know, it's not a huge reinvention, but looking at your business model and say, is there a different way that we've got to engage with customers is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And hopefully they're not setting up labs in their kitchen.
I've seen some scientists who have, because they don't have access to the lab anymore. So they've converted that. There was one gentleman on Twitter that converted his basement into a lab, I saw. So.
Oh, no. Okay.
Creativity.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, we have several questions coming in here. One is around marketing strategies. You know, what is working, and are you allowed to share any metrics or success during this pandemic?
So for my business, a couple of things are working. I would say that the main theme of what's working is vehicles that educate rather than, you know, pound your chest about a product, but resources that educate. So what we've done is we've produced some resource guides on certain techniques, which of course feature relevant products, but in a subtle manner that are more tools that the scientists can use to educate themselves, et cetera. And the other path we've taken in a number of our companies, which has been extremely effective, are webinars. And we've seen registration at webinars soar during this period. And that's been remarkable and a pleasant surprise. So we've been able to engage with existing customers, and what we're finding, a lot of the webinar attendees are pass-alongs to new customers who are then getting engaged with our brands, et cetera, and hopefully at some point in the future leading to some business. But those are the two main tactics we've taken from a marketing standpoint. I hope that addresses the person's question who asked it.
Yes. Okay. Does anybody else have anything further to add to that, or shall we go on to another question?
No, go ahead, Hrissi.
We shifted from traditional marketing technology, if you wish, to obviously digital means. And to David's point, our customers had, the ones who were not working, they had time on their hands. The ones that they were working, they needed COVID-related information, they needed new workflows. So in both cases, the key was educational content. or content that will help them for whatever they do at the time. So we shifted, we downplayed anything that was push, anything that was more marketing, more sales, and we focused on enabling them with whatever they were doing at any given moment. Education, from writing a grant to as you are at home, all the way to anything that has to do with COVID workflows.
Right.
And I would echo that. I think, you know, it's never more relevant that compelling, contextually relevant content is, you know, is what is going to drive that engagement. And also I would echo the comment about education. I mean, if somebody is not in their laboratory, it's not really much point sending them a coupon for 50% off a product that they're not going to use at the time, you know. So there's an opportunity to really engage through education, through that compelling content, and really drive up, you know, share of mind more than share of wallet, which I think is actually the key aspect of a lot of this at the moment. I think there's also an element where you can build brand trust as well by doing that. You know, we're obviously communicating around a particular product or technology or whatever it might be, but you're also sending a message that, you know, your brand is a brand that you can trust because you're actually educating them for the future, for when they go back to the laboratory and start to use those products and technologies again.
Yeah. So another question that came in was around reaching customers by phone. This one actually has a question around in the labs, and do you see split shifts by customers? Are they only working part-time?
Yeah, I don't, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I know that certainly a number of our researchers in universities are definitely working shifts. I think one of the, you know, academics tend to work, or sometimes people like to work in the evenings anyway. So I think you're getting natural shifts of people, you know, are going to come in the evening, some in the daytime, some that are working Mondays and Tuesdays and not Wednesdays and Thursdays. So we definitely have seen that. And that does actually mean that, you know, if you're going to telephone a lab, it is more challenging. I think on the telephone for us, it's been interesting where, if I'm honest, our telephone numbers in our database are not very good. You know, we've become so reliant on email. And, you know, very often, you know, people's telephones are the lab phone and it's used by multiple people. So people haven't collected that. So, you know, when we've looked at that, our emails may be good, but the telephone numbers have actually been terrible.
Yeah.
We've been trying to leverage LinkedIn a bit, you know, in terms of connecting with customers. And I wonder if you, Andy, or Hrissi have been doing the same.
We have, and during the pandemic, we also noticed an increase in not only LinkedIn, but even Facebook, social media, more everyday social media type of engagement. We see questions through an engagement through Facebook that we typically have not seen. But as Andy said, even our email metrics, and somebody earlier asked about metrics, even our email metrics improved in terms of click-throughs, etc., during the pandemic, particularly from our academic customer segments. Phones, not so much. When we do marketing, we obviously don't reach through phones, but our sales reps are using phone more. But again, we see engagement online via email and social media.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things I was going to make, it is interesting. I'm sure you've done the same thing, looking at web stats and how you can see different parts of the country, or if you look at the globe as well, you can definitely see how web traffic did mimic the impact of the pandemic. And you can see even, you know, institutions going up in a certain IP address as they start to come back. So it's an interesting leading indicator.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that was obvious in the data that we shared last month from Joan at BioCompare. I have, you know, one question which is going to move us into our next phase of questions, and I do apologize. We do have quite a number of questions coming in as well, but I think this one's quite important because, you know, now everybody is going for Zoom. There are all of these webinars. So are your customers experiencing virtual burnout and not wanting to join Zoom or team meetings anymore? And how do you deal with it? So I think that's two phases. It's, you know, are your customers experiencing burnout from Zoom webinars and conferencing? And also, what about your sales teams as well?
Well, it's definitely a concern that we've spoken about. I personally don't see evidence that customers are burning out from this. I don't know what Andy and Hrissi think, but I don't see any evidence of that. In terms of employees, that's potentially a different question. I worry about employee burnout from just being you know, stuck at home, but then again, many customers are stuck at home as well, but you know, on Zoom or Teams all day. But I think from what I can see, our team is dealing with it reasonably well and managing through this well. And many people are getting quite accustomed to working from home, at least in terms of employees.
Yeah, I would agree. No evidence of customers. Actually, to be honest, we had seen the transition to more virtual events one way or another. And as a company, we're very distributed. So myself or my own team, I relied mostly on either WebEx or Zoom or Teams, whatever the platform is. So I don't see us necessarily being burned out because of using these virtual platforms. But I do worry, as David said, about the difficulty to separate your day and night, your Saturday from your Friday from your Saturday when you're working from home. That I definitely worry. Not necessarily the platforms, because we have been using them a lot already. For customers, again, I don't have any direct evidence. They are kind of stuck like we are. So we have been launching some virtual webinar platforms. We have been joining some virtual events, and we see participation right now. But again, we'll have to see how things evolve from here.
Customers have the luxury of choosing which Zoom webinars or whatever they attend, what companies they want to engage with. Employees, if they're told to attend a meeting, they have to attend a meeting. They don't have the same choice. Yeah. And as Hrissi said, you know, some of us, whether you have a small apartment or a big house, you essentially roll out of bed and into your office. And, you know, the concept of a starting time and an ending time, it blurs. And that does worry me in terms of employee burnout.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. I think coming back to the customer part of the question, we haven't seen any sort of drop off necessarily in webinar attendance, but you definitely do, or we definitely have seen variance depending on the topic. So anything COVID related definitely is getting higher traction than something that's not. But your other point you made, David, about selection, I think the customers definitely have more choice. So, you know, I'm sure it's the same with everybody's emails, you know, you're getting whatever, you know, 10, 20 different webinars you're being invited to on a daily basis. So I think it is harder sometimes for the customers to actually distinguish which one am I going to attend. And that's where content, you know, the brand, the recognition of your company, I think definitely appeals. I don't know this, but I would imagine a newer company to the space is going to find it hard to break through that noise than somebody who has a, you know, reputation and perhaps a, you know, more loyal customer base. I don't know whether this is anecdotal as well, but I have heard from some of the sales staff that in their sort of meetings they've been setting up, a larger number of customers prefer to just speak and not be seen, you know, even if it's on Teams or Zoom and things, you know, rather than actually be seen, whether that means they're, I don't know, in their pajamas or something, I'm not sure, but, you know, but they definitely hasn't been the same level of face-to-face interactions as we have with internal meetings, for example.
Actually, I've noticed the same, Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And I think this is a great moment to go into our poll. Let's go ahead and start a poll. Are you or anyone on your team experiencing mental or physical fatigue as a result of working remotely? So I shall launch that poll and we'll give it a few seconds. If you can all, you know, vote is totally anonymous. And everybody can see the poll, is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Okay, it looks like a lot of people work well at home. Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'm going to end the poll now, but as I said, it looks like most people are working well at home. A few people are feeling fatigued as well, and that could be as a result of being unable to distinguish between your weekends and your days and nights and so on. So thank you. You can share the results here. Stop sharing. Okay, great, thank you. So I think a lot of questions have come in around virtual conferences. I think, it might be pertinent to go ahead and talk about those. So how are you participating in virtual conferences, and what is your feedback on them?
We are, we always have. I mean, we have been experimenting with them before. I mean, obviously this year, most of what we had planned in terms of physical conferences end up becoming a virtual conference. As an example, we just, actually late last week and earlier this week, we did the American Chemical Society, which is a huge conference, and it all happened virtually. So personally, I think they're here to stay. The question for me is how we can best, as a marketer, how I can best leverage them. And from the customer perspective, how, I think Andy said something earlier, how can they choose the right topic, either being a conference or being a webinar, whatever it is, so there are pluses. I mean, we can engage wider audiences, for example. Okay, there are environmental pluses if we don't have to travel. From the areas that they worry me, and I think we as participants, but also organizers need to invest. And I'm not going to talk about technology platforms. Obviously, the technology platforms need to allow for consistency, dependability during an event, interactivity, okay, to make them engaging for both ends, the content providers and the content receivers. As a life science marketer and a professional in life science space, I think we have to evolve. We have to evolve. We spoke earlier about content. We need to optimize our content for that media. And we typically lag behind. So we need to optimize the content to be more digestible, if you wish, in that format. It's not going to be the same PowerPoint that we used in a physical conference. So my focus will be to make sure we do evolve and we optimize the content for this new vehicle. And the other area of concern is, as a marketer's investing money, obviously the ROI needs to be there. And we have to figure it out. We have to, so far it seems that we get more tangible leads versus a physical event, but we don't know yet how good these leads are and how, you know what this is the areas that we're focusing on, trying to leverage them and optimize the way we cater to this new media.
Yeah, we've participated in some virtual conferences as well, and I would say overall we've been rather dissatisfied. You know, many of these different conferences use different platforms, and getting used to different platforms, both from the standpoint of the supplier as well as customers, takes some getting used to, and I think it's awkward. It'd be very nice if they could be standardized, but that's probably unlikely to happen. But what we have found in the virtual conferences that we've attended is the ones that are most successful are the ones in which we have a speaking slot, some sort of presentation slot. And that tends to draw more people into our virtual booth, if you would. But I think these virtual conferences are here for a long time. I think they're not yet perfected. And I think there's a business opportunity for someone out there to perfect these and make them much more useful to companies like Andy's and Hrissi's and mine.
Yeah, I would agree fully with both of your comments, and particularly your last one you mentioned there, David, in terms of the ability to give presentations. You know, if you think about the analogy of a physical conference, then the attendees are choosing which track to go down, which you know, which seminar to actually watch, which area of science they're interested in, etc. And then you have often the trade show floor is, you know, akin to that, and all of the sort of attendees go to the trade show floor, you know, when there's a break, when there's lunch, you know. But now you watch it online and you go to your kitchen instead of going to the trade show to get a cup of coffee or your lunch or what have you. So drawing people into that trade show is much more difficult. And certainly the ones where we've tried to incentivize people to, you know, come to the booth, you know, then, you know, a lot of the traffic then is about what is the freebie or what have you, not necessarily getting a quality lead that you can do. And without that, that scientific presence, if you like, and the content, as Hrissi was mentioning, then it is very hard to justify a return. You know, some meetings, obviously, if it's a society that you're sponsoring, you know, and it's for the more altruistic reasons, then there's a different sort of a proposition there. But if it is geared around lead generation, you know, it's hard unless you have that that scientific platform to present on.
Yeah. Are you finding that the leads that are coming in now are higher quality than previously?
Conferences specifically?
I'd say it's too early. From my perspective, it's too early to tell.
I would agree with David. We definitely can capture more. But it's harder to qualify them. All this, as Andy said, over there you could ask questions. You could qualify a lead in a physical trade show. In a virtual one, we tend to get more registrations, particularly if you have speaking slots. But the verdict in terms of the quality of the lead we still need to determine that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Maybe just to add as well, I think from an ROI perspective, I'm not sure the sort of organizations that are putting this have really thought through the cost model, because it feels like it's actually more expensive in some ways if you take out, obviously I'm excluding, you know, travel and that aspect of it, but it feels the actual sponsorship aspect is more expensive than it was before.
I don't know about you. I'm not getting any. I don't sense the organizers of these meetings are giving us any direction or, you know, I think the organizers can spend a little more time on helping us make it more effective. I don't sense they're doing that.
Totally. I agree regarding the cost. And, you know, again, as an executive that tries to justify investment, there is an expectation that in a virtual forum, it will be less of a cost. But it has been the opposite so far. Yeah. So we need an ROI to justify these investments.
It's like online education versus in-person education. There's no reduction in cost at Stanford University. So,
so how do you feel that virtual conferences could be improved?
Yeah,
I think we have on already some of those. Yeah,
I was going to say, for me, I think it comes down to greater dialogue between the organizers and the suppliers, and thinking about what other vehicles there are to actually, you know, be involved. You know, it could be more, I don't know, technology platform type presentations, you know, or you know, sections that are dedicated to, you know, that sort of scientific presentation versus the application of it, which is typically what our customers are presenting. So I think that that sort of opportunity to me would open up doors. It feels like, you know, if you want to have a speaking slot, you have to have a booth, you know, and I don't see the two are necessarily connected, provided you can actually have another way of capturing people's interest, you know, post giving that presentation.
in our space, and when I say that in the wider life science space, yeah, the organizers are kind of transferring a physical event into a virtual event without considering the difference in the media. For example, interactivity for me, it's a key to keep the audience engaged in a virtual forum. So, and I know other industries from telecom, from information systems, etc. They do have better ways of engaging the speakers with the attendees, if you wish. Yeah. So anything along those lines, I think, will be necessary.
Great, thanks. So I think I'd like to post another poll to the audience and get their opinion around virtual events. Let me see if I can get to the second one. Okay. Here we go. Here we are. What has been your experience with virtual trade shows, conferences, and webinars? I know one of the comments that came through on the chat, someone was saying they really missed the physical conferences. So when does everybody feel we will go back to physical conferences? And do you think that it will be a hybrid of virtual and physical conferences?
I think it's going to be quite a while before the old normal trade show comes back into vogue. I think we may be beyond that. I think traditional trade show attendance was waning anyway, both from the standpoint of suppliers as well as customers. And you know, I for one have been a proponent of scaling back trade show investment for quite a while. But I also think you know, vaccine or no vaccine, it's going to take quite a while for people's confidence to be high enough to get into a crowded situation. So I think it's going to be, I don't think we're going to see any trade shows this year in the conventional sense. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see any trade shows next year. I really wouldn't. So I think the key here is somehow we've got to think about how to make virtual events or some sort of combination more effective than what we have today.
Great.
Yeah.
And it looks like 60% of the audience finds that the virtual sessions are great, but they miss the interaction with their peers. Mm-hmm. Thank you, everybody, for participating in the polls. I think another topic, although you know we do have loads of questions, and we'll probably respond to them at a later date through blogs and information on the website. But I think you know, if we transition into the sales side of things, there is a question here. The way sales engage customers has changed significantly, frequency and in-person relationship building, and some changes may be permanent. What are some strategies considered to evolve the sales organization, process, tools, and so on to sustain sales effectiveness in the new market environment? And how have you handled commissions and other variable comp plans since March?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I see my old friend Mark asked that question. No last names included, but I could see that. Thanks, Mark, for being part of the call. It's a great question. Well, we've adjusted targets, particularly for Q2 and Q3. We've adjusted targets for our sales team to in light of the pandemic. So we've been very flexible in that regard, and I think we have a satisfied sales team as a result. So that's my answer to that one particular question. I'll let Andy and Hrissi perhaps comment on the other parts. We
haven't changed regarding compensation. I would agree with David. in a way, it's still early. And overall, as a corporation, it's not a secret. We're public. We're doing okay because obviously we're selling COVID testing kits and so on and so forth. And we have a policy of, you know, if something goes good, we are all trying to participate. So that so far, not many changes. We are looking, to be honest, we were looking before the pandemic on how the sales organization will evolve. We were looking similarly how the marketing organization will evolve from traditional to more digital and more data driven. So even that somebody can argue, may call for shifting traditional sales investments to e-commerce as a point of argument. So we've been looking into this in an ongoing basis. Obviously now our customers, I think as we're exiting, whenever that will happen, as we're going to exit the COVID era, the pandemic, our customers will be conditioned to expect a different interaction with sales. And that's what we need to be on top of. But frankly, as an organization, we're looking at this right now. We don't have the solution formulated. I'll tell you for sure, we're shifting investments in digital and e-commerce. And we're also, let me give you one tangible example. Our sales meetings for 2021, that are already going, 3 months ago, we have decided that they will take place across the globe virtually. So we brought consultants in and to find the right platform. So all of our trainings, sales trainings, all of our sales meetings for at least the first half of 2021 will be virtual. And if they are successful, I would agree with David's comment earlier. We will land in a hybrid format where a lot will happen virtually, but then we will allow some of the physical interaction for the purpose of networking and building relationships.
I won't. A lot of the things are very similar to what David and Hrissi have just said. I think one thing I would echo is the comment that Hrissi made about data. I think, you know, not being able to visit customers means you're ever more dependent on your CRM system and the content that it has about what customers are doing. You know, whether we'll truly be able to ever, you know, personalize one-to-one our sort of sales and marketing messages to an individual customer perhaps is still a debatable point. But customers' expectations of being able to serve them with information and products and content that are relevant to their research in our case is going to become ever more important. One thing that we have found, and this is still a work in progress, I'm sure everybody's heard of account-based marketing. A new term that I heard recently was called account-based engagement. You know, taking the marketing out of it because it really should be sales, marketing, and in our case also the field application specialists, or maybe it's, you know, instrumentation service colleagues as well. And having those work together to actually come up with an approach for an account which drives a greater knowledge of actually the individual researchers at that account and the knowledge of that account has actually been quite successful. I think in a strange way, having everybody work from home has allowed them to focus on these sort of projects, you know, more so than if they'd all been doing their more regular activities, let's say. So that has been one area that we've seen a change, or hope to see a change in our sort of sales activity, by having sales be a process that involves marketing and the field application specialist more as a team than an individual, and then working as a team to develop unique tactics at that account.
Great, thank you. So I think, you know, talking about, you know, the sales teams and trainings, you know, you're mentioning these virtual events. What about the customers? You know, sometimes they need product training or technical support. What changes are you seeing in that?
Maybe I'll kick that one off first. I mean, it is, from our perspective, living in the sort of Northeast, you know, we're used to snowstorms, so our customer service and tech support teams were all set up to work remotely anyway. So operationally, it wasn't really a change. I think David alluded to this a little bit earlier, but generally, you know, there's a lot of customers out there who want to actually talk for longer than they have previously. I think maybe they're lonely, or we've also seen in the tech support realm a lot more basic questions coming in. I think partly because there's less people in the lab, and maybe they'd ask, you know, somebody in the bay next door or the lab next door, how do you do this? There's nobody to ask. So as a consequence, they're calling up, you know, the appropriate vendor to ask for that support. So I think longer conversations, you know, educational conversations, which we talked about. Even in some cases, I think I was talking to one of our customer service team, and they mentioned they've seen an increase in PIs or actually ordering, and they don't normally order, but the lab manager isn't there, so they've got to place the order, sort of thing, because they work in shifts. So I think there is a need for, you know, in some ways, more basic support than perhaps was being asked for previously.
You know, we've actually decided to bring our customer service people, the front line, let's say order takers, back into the office. And we did that maybe 6 weeks ago. We felt that it was important, at least in my business, for those customer service people to have close interactions with operations and shipping and the like. So, and we felt a little bit of that was suffering when the teams were apart. So we brought them back into the facility. And for us, that's worked out quite well. On the technical support side, we're still doing that remotely for the most part, for most of our businesses. And we have found that the level of tech support now has gotten back to pre-pandemic levels. So that's a sign of the, you know, the rejuvenation of the business, and particularly in academia, that it's starting, well, more than starting, it's coming back alive. So we haven't changed too much in terms of our tech service practices, but yeah, in terms of sales, I think, you know, we're looking now at some programs for anyone who's on the telephone in terms of giving presentation skills and virtually, and how to do that. I think it requires a bit of nuance as opposed to what you can do in person. So we're looking at investments in specialized programs in terms of virtual presentation skills and virtual interactions with customers, and how to get the most out of them.
Yeah, maybe that's the only thing I would like to add related to VR or AR, or whatever is the right term. If we have to install an instrument, we'll install it. We were installing instruments during the pandemic if customers needed them, with all the precautions necessary. But we have, even before the pandemic, we were looking into ways to, as David said, do demos, do via virtual reality, for example. I'm not saying it's perfected, but we were experimenting even before, and I'm expecting this will increase now. Also, another area that we may see an increase is related to connected instruments and lab automation. Like, instead of, we were experimenting before, I'm assuming we will do more of that now, to avoid sending people to fix instruments. If we can do a lot of the diagnostics, for example, via connected instruments through the cloud. So personally, I expect we will see more of that as a result of the pandemic.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think we'll close by posing this question to all of the panelists. And with that said, we have 5 minutes left of the webinar. So how do you see the new normal?
Wow.
Sorry, I'll take a step first, if you like. So maybe I'll argue that it's neither new nor normal. I say that because if you think about what we discussed here, you know, we've talked about, you know, a stronger move to digital. We've talked about, you know, demise of trade shows a little bit. We talked about getting access to customers are more difficult. I would argue a lot of those trends were already happening anyway. They've just accelerated. Now, there's many things that have changed, of course, but many of the trends, I think, an acceleration of trends rather than being virtually new.
Yeah.
That said, it's definitely not normal, you know, and the inability to sort of meet with customers face to face, I think, is perhaps the biggest aspect of that we've touched on. I think that will change. You know, certainly looking at some of my colleagues in other parts of the world, Germany, for example, they're starting to actually meet face to face with customers again, seeing it also in China. It's taking a little bit longer in other countries like the US and the UK, but I think that will actually change. And maybe, you know, I still think we're probably over 6 months away from that, but I think next calendar year, some of those interactions will start to happen.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Andy. Nothing beats face-to-face interactions. That's at least my belief, and I think that's really important. And although I don't see those face-to-face interactions happening too much in 2020, I believe there will be a return to that. Does that mean we're going to get into a large group in a meeting room at a client's facility and do that type of approach as we did once before? I think that's a ways off, but do I see a path where I can have a one-on-one meeting with a customer with appropriate distancing? I do. I don't see it this year, but I see it, and it's likely to come next year. That's my view.
I agree. I think physical interactions will be here to stay, but virtual interactions will be here to stay. And I think if we come back in a year from now, we will have been shifted the balance towards, that's my expectation, because towards more virtual, because we will prove through this time that we can still stay successful, either as professionals or customers, via virtual means. But I totally agree with David. The physical interactions will come back. It will be a year, 18 months, they will come back. With the right vaccines.
That's what I was going to say. There's a lot of unknowns in terms of an answer to that question. And the key unknown is what Hrissi just said, the situation with the vaccine. And, you know, when will a vaccine be available? How many of us will get vaccinated? How long will it last? How does that translate into confidence that we can go out, even old guys like me, go out and interface with other people safely? I think a lot of it's going to come back to, come down to confidence.
Very true.
Well, thank you very much. I think it has been a great discussion, and we've received lots of wonderful questions, which we will try and answer after this webinar. We will be sharing the link, but I'd also like to tell you about our next webinar, which is on September the 23rd. David will be your moderator, but we have, going from left to right, Ethan Kopit of HubSpot, David Corey from Abcam, Laura Haldane from SciLeads, and Chris Barbazet from Genapsys, and they will be talking about the new paradigm for selling. We hope you can join us. We will be sending out a registration link for that event shortly. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.